And before you know it, the very bully all of you were scared and aggravated about a little while ago is the victim that you are now trying to soothe and appease and make sure everything's okay. It's the ultimate sleight of hand, the switching of the masks, the shape-shifting move that they're so good at. It's the victim-bully sequence. Today, I'm specifically going to be talking about this concept of victimhood, which so characterizes the narcissistic personality style. Now, this is a difficult video to make. I actually don't like the word victim. I'm a bigger fan of words like experiencer, because the word victim is so passive, it's so resigned. And maybe because of my work in this area, the dynamics of victimhood are so often weaponized by narcissistic people, and it becomes really harmful. So maybe that's why I don't like it. But just as a reminder, this series kind of goes off the beaten track a little bit. It's for people out there who think that they may be narcissistic and they feel like, hey, all of your content just demonizes me. Give me something that helps me. Or they just do want to be better, and I admire that goal. Shifting out of a narcissistic personality is obviously not easy, but it's obviously worth doing. This series lays out these dynamics, why these dynamics are an issue, and how to get around it. Today we're going to talk about this idea of narcissistic victimhood. Listen, if something bad happens to any of us, it feels deeply unfair, it feels damaging, it feels harmful, and we struggle with it. It feels unjust. And then if we open that up a little more, and we recognize that life hasn't been fair to us, I don't know, maybe we look at our lives and say, maybe we didn't get the financial support that would have made a difference in our lives. Maybe we didn't get the emotional support that would have made a difference in our lives. Whatever it may be, it's very easy to fall into a sort of self-victimized thinking and talking. This idea that life isn't fair to me. If only this had happened to me, or only that had happened to me. Because the problem is, if you do that, then you live in that place of regret and rumination. It's simply not good for us to get stuck in these thought loops. It strips us of our sense of agency, or the sense we can do something to help ourselves. And it keeps us stuck in the past rather than saying, hey, nothing on this adventure called life is fair, and it's going to be even less fair if I keep letting this sense of injustice keep holding me back. Now, in people who have narcissistic personalities, they chronically, and I mean chronically, feel that life has been uniquely unfair to them, even when it's actually been disproportionately lucky in some cases. The nature of the narcissistic personality is to chronically perceive threats, and this belief that people are actually out to get them, or they maintain this consistent entitlement to be treated better, that they deserve more, that they deserve this, that they deserve that. It means this chronic mindset of life is never fair to me. Everyone in life has it better than me. Nobody is ever nice to me, even though I'm so good to everyone. It's a constant sense of why me? Why do all these bad things only happen to me when I'm so nice to everyone? I remember talking for a while to a person who was clearly very narcissistic. This was a person who was born to a rather wealthy family. They had tremendous means. His education was fully paid for. He could explore any dream he wanted. He was given a car when he turned 16. He was given apartments to live in, and his rent was always paid. And his parents paid at least $300,000 on his various rehab stays. He ended up marrying a beautiful woman. He ended up having beautiful children. And this man constantly, I mean constantly, complained about how life is so unfair to him. Everyone is so mean to him. Why does that person have a better beach house? Everyone uses me for my stuff. Honestly, I wish I was as victimized as this guy, right? So this narcissistically victimized mentality, frankly, it's exhausting for other people to listen to, especially if all the rest of us are carrying the same burdens or worse. Now, when I work with narcissistic clients, we do get to the point where I say to them, why is it that you think you deserve justice and fairness more than anyone else? Sometimes that's the day they drop out of therapy. And sometimes in the clients with narcissistic personalities who are actually trying to do the work, those clients will say, no, I guess you're right. I guess I'm no more entitled to that than anyone else. And at that point, I know we've got a shot at maybe getting somewhere. Because that's what all of this comes down to. Life is not fair. In fact, it is so deeply unfair and unjust that it actually defies logic. Luck is just about everything. And then, if you throw some hard work on top of that luck, then frankly, the sky is the limit. Hard work without luck, that's a really tough path. But for narcissistic people, they do believe that they are entitled to justice and fairness, but they don't concern themselves with whether everyone else is. But above all that, they feel they're the ones who are entitled to it. And they will rage against the world and those closest to them, and will even blame them for this perceived injustice and unfairness. It is painful to come to this awareness of how deeply unfair life is. Some people are born into families with loving, attentive, kind, and available parents, and some, many, are not. Some are instead horribly abused and neglected and mistreated. Some people are born into money or privilege. Many are not, and they may watch their families scrape by and be treated badly by the world for being a sort of have-not. Some people are born smart or athletic or with a certain skill or appearance, while others may come into the world with something that may limit them a little bit more intellectually, physically, or in some other way. All of this is unfair, and there are no magical karmic scales in the sky that make it all right. We have to play the hand that we are dealt. Some people are literally born as lottery winners. The rest of us, we keep playing the numbers and have to make the most of life, even if those numbers don't hit. None of it's fair. Narcissist, not narcissist, doesn't matter. The work of being a human being is to get our head around that and play that hand that we were dealt. And that is very difficult for people with narcissistic personalities. This dynamic of victimhood is most pronounced in the vulnerable narcissistic style. It is one of the key covert manifestations of this style. The constant, oh, woe is me. Nobody's able to see how great I really am because I'm just not appreciated. I didn't have a trust fund. If I had had that, my life would be easier. My parents treated me badly, or my parents didn't treat me badly enough, or my parents spoiled me, or my parents didn't spoil me enough. Nothing goes my way. I shouldn't have to get an entry-level job. I shouldn't have to hand my paper in by the deadline. Mentality. The idea that life is unfair and unjust to the narcissistic person, it doesn't fit well with the thought process of grandiosity and entitlement and perception of specialness that narcissistic people have. So instead of trying, there is a greater likelihood of falling back into the idea that I should be too good to have to try because I'm great. Things should just come my way. Because after all, I'm me, and I'm entitled to it. Not so much. Now, the victimhood, this stance of victimhood, leaves other people in the position of feeling that they often need to rescue the narcissistic person, reassure them, and leave them feeling that everything will be okay. And people will often spend countless hours trying to show the narcissistic person all the great things in their lives so they will stop with the self-victimization. And that is exhausting for the other people around the narcissistic person because it's hard for other people to do it if you're not getting it back. If they're doing it for the narcissistic person usually isn't doing it for them. Now, if you think you're narcissistic, does this mean that you have to suck it up and never get to speak about your pain? Not at all. But when you talk about it as feelings. Take ownership. Recognize how this way of thinking is holding you back. Be kind to yourself and let go of the shame that you may have about bad things happening to you. Bring all of that out into the light. All of us have the right to speak about our pain, and should, but to break out of that cycle of using that kind of thinking as a way to get out of having to take responsibility and take ownership of your life, and to break the cycle of blaming other people. So if you think you're narcissistic and you think you have a real propensity to victimhood, what should you do? Number one, say it, write it, meditate into it, breathe it. However you have to get what I'm about to say into you, life is inherently unfair to everyone, just about everyone. So that means an existential choice to keep on keeping on despite this. This life is unfair thing isn't a persecution of just you. It's something most of us grapple with, because the unfair part may not be your responsibility, but the ability to get up and do what you can instead of falling back into it, that's your responsibility, and it's a gift to yourself. Otherwise, the concept of unfairness actually wins, because you spend your whole lifetime grousing about how everything is unfair and never really live your life. Number two, you gotta grieve it. It sucks. It sucks to come from an unhappy or an abusive family. It sucks to not have enough money. It sucks to have opportunities slip away or not come around in the first place. All of this is terrible, and it hurts, and it's real. And these losses and these hurts, they need to be grieved. Be angry. Be sad. Let the emotions happen to you, but recognize them as grief. And when you can let the feelings flow, then you may get to the other side instead of always fighting these feelings and always being mad at the world. Number three, please stop thinking that you are the exception to the rule. This exceptionalism is a real hallmark of narcissism, and it really gets people stuck. And being stuck obviously isn't good. None of us should be the exception. Now, some people may end up becoming the exception, and that's maybe that luck, but none of us is really an exception. Try and find some comfort in the collective idea in that. Now, this can fly in the face of the narcissistic need to be special. All of us are special. All of us aren't special. It all comes down to your point of view. But it's not just you. Number four, remember that other people are going through stuff too. Sometimes a lot more stuff than you. Assume that. If you work from that assumption, it can actually leave the world feeling less threatening, less unfair, and more like a place where lots of other people who are just like you are just trying to get through. Don't assume that everyone is having an easier ride than you. Some are, of course there are, but not all are having an easier ride. In fact, many probably aren't. Now, number five, as a shrink, I get to see into the private lives of many people, and let me tell you this: rich or poor, beautiful or homely, educated or not, big job or no job, any race, any nationality, any political persuasion, people actually have much worse backstories than you think. Lots more people than you know had bad childhoods, terrible experiences, horrible sacrifices, and the danger in the narcissistic personality is to write the story as though everyone else has it better or easier. I am telling you this as someone who really gets to be sort of an explorer of other people's lives, not of places, like I said, but of people. There is so much pain and loss and difficulty in people's lives than you could ever imagine. Try that thought on and find the empathy in that. Number six, people don't want to keep reassuring you. They don't want to keep reassuring you or me or anyone. It's time you learn to reassure yourself. Harness that victimhood into other emotions that may motivate you to give stuff and the stuff of life and the work of life a real shot. At least if you try, then at the end of your life you can say, listen, I gave it a shot, which is a far less bitter pill to swallow than the idea that life was never fair to me. Number seven, instead of asking why me, ask why not? Shit happens, good and bad. Although this is a little bit more of a positive than the usual Dr. RAMANI stuff I put out there, if I might ask you, for 1 month, keep a little record in your phone each day of one good thing that happened to you. I don't know what those could be. You got praised at a meeting. A dinner you cooked turned out well. An old friend called out of the blue. Someone let you go ahead of them in a supermarket line. Gratitude actually can be cultivated, and it is a real hedge against feelings of victimhood. If you suspect that you're narcissistic, and if you can break this cycle of victimhood, you actually will feel that life is actually a little more fair, even if lots of bad stuff happened to you. That instead of excusing not trying, that you actually try, and even if it doesn't go the way you want, there's always some health in the actual process of trying. It's called efficacy, and it's good for you. A major antidote to narcissistic personality styles and the patterns associated with narcissism are to just take responsibility and stop blaming other people. Initially, it can feel really uncomfortable, but can break you out of these victimized cycles that not only hold you back, but harm the people around you. If you really do think you're narcissistic and want to push back on it, then take some of this in and please give it a try. I promise you that even if you try 1 or 2 of these things and they work, it will really go a long way to help you help yourself feel better about your place in the world and less angry at the other people in it. So let's talk about the victim bully. I know you've heard about it, but let's just really break it down. It's really going to help you understand narcissism a lot more clearly. And if any of you have really encountered that victim bully dynamic in your narcissistic relationship, drop it in the comments. But the fact is, if you have a narcissist in your life, I can already guarantee you, you have encountered this dynamic. So the narcissist, we could actually almost call narcissism victim bully, but yeah, we call it narcissism. So the victim bully is one of the most classical dynamics in the narcissistic personality and in the narcissistic relationship. And like I said, I'm surprised I haven't talked about it. I think it's inserted itself here and there. But it's really important to understand this dynamic, the victim bully, accurately, because it also sheds a lot of light onto understanding the trauma bond. Now, let me lay out a scenario for you in a rough way. So there's a big, bad, bullying, bossy narcissist about raging around, yelling, demanding, being selfish, entitled, the basic expectable stuff from a narcissist. People are kind of afraid of this person. They walk on eggshells. Everyone is typically cutting the narcissistic bully a really wide berth. Finally, someone snaps. They don't even care about the narcissistic person's rage. And they snap back and they say, "You are such an a-hole. Just stop. You are such a jerk. You are ruining everybody's day around here. Nobody wants to be here anymore because of you. We just wish you would leave. You are such an awful person." Okay. They say that to the narcissist. Then the narcissist does a Charlie Brown on you, head down, and they start in on, "Okay, I was just trying to do what people wanted. I spent the whole day trying to make sure I got you guys the right food and the right stuff. I was just trying to help everyone." And then they may lean into saying things like, "Oh God, you guys have always been out to get me. I am so good to everyone. Why do you always target me?" Okay, if that's what you want. You want me to leave? Okay, I guess I'm going to leave. Nobody wants me here. And they may even walk away, right? Oh, I know. You don't want me anymore. You just use me, right? So why don't you all just have a good time without me? And it's always seemed that no, you just expect me to just bring all the stuff and do everything for y'all, but you have more fun when I'm not here. And honestly, none of you understand me. None of you even want to understand me. And then they sort of shamefully walk out of the room, and the whole thing is sort of sad and pathetic to watch, right? And then you, the empathic soul that you are, after seeing that, you want to reach after them and say, "Listen, okay, I'm sorry, right? We don't need to do this anymore, right? I was so harsh." It's amazing how quickly you forget how ragey and awful they were just a few minutes ago. "No, I listen, I didn't mean to hurt you. You were getting rough on everyone.
but we want you to stay, okay? And then they're going to mope a little while longer, and you try even harder to pull them in. And before you know it, the very bully all of you were scared and aggravated about a little while ago is the victim that you are now trying to soothe and appease and make sure everything's okay. It's the ultimate sleight of hand, the switching of the masks, the shape-shifting move that they're so good at. It's the victim-bully sequence. Narcissistic folks have this mastered to a magical art form. Vulnerable narcissists tend to be the ones that are the best at it, but every narcissist does it. It's what makes the trauma bond so traumatic. Just when a person hits the breaking point with a narcissistic person, that the rage and all of the invalidation and the berating and the humiliation finally gets to a person, and they take a stand against the narcissist is masterful at playing the sulking, petulant victim. And because most people stuck in narcissistic relationships tend to be pretty good, kind, compassionate, empathic people, they struggle with seeing the sort of the consequences like that leave the narcissist looking so victimized and sad, and they recant. And they find themselves trying to cheer up the victimized narcissist because people who've suffered narcissistic abuse are uncomfortable with that tension, with that conflict. It's a brilliant but sick maneuver by the narcissistic person. In one quick second, they are able to turn the tables from someone actually being really angry with them or upset about them to someone trying to appease them. In many cases, narcissistic people are so good at playing the victim that people tend to forget the bullying sequence that just happened and just focus their energies on making sure that the narcissist is okay. Another way that the victim-bully sequence plays out is when you do call them out on their bad behavior. They try to play it off as a joke. You may say, you know what you just did or said, it was hurtful or it was wrong. And they will come back with, oh, come on, that was a joke. I was just joking. Can't you take a joke? And if you push harder and say, it's not really okay to make jokes at another person's expense or that hurts them, and that it sort of felt abusive, that's when they'll start to become rageful. Because basically, at that point, you're kind of calling them out as a bit of a rotten, abusive person. And that inflames the whole shame rage spiral. At their deepest core, narcissistic people know that they're not nice people. And when that primal stuff gets stirred up, their claws come out. Trying to make it about being a joke, frankly, is gaslighting. And it puts them in the victim position of being oh so misunderstood. You didn't understand my joke. The structural reason for this is because every narcissist has both the grandiose and the vulnerable elements encompassed with them. And they're grandiose when stuff's going well, right? But when the grandiose stuff isn't working, stuff in their life isn't going their way, or they get called out, or they experience something that activates their shame, for example, someone calling them out on their behavior, then the vulnerable narcissist comes out to play, and then the victimhood descends. The victim-bully sequence confuses people, but once you recognize it as a strategy or a tactic by the narcissistic person, it makes more sense than seeing it as the narcissist being two different people. They are, in fact, one person, one very tactical, manipulative person. Over time, this victim-bully thing has worked for them. Don't get me wrong. When they are hurt, and for them, hurt means ego injury, not necessarily hurt feelings per se. But when something happens, something that makes them not look good to other people, or they feel that they aren't being adequately appreciated, it doesn't feel good for them. And that's when they slide immediately into the victimized, woe is me. That part in and of itself isn't that interesting. Many of us, even non-narcissists, can pretty easily fall into a victimized space when people are calling us out. The difference is that the narcissistic people have the bully piece alongside the victim piece. So the juxtaposition of the two is what is so striking, that they can go from being such jerks to being so victimized just like that. I am thinking of one situation I had observed. The guy was a world-class narcissist, arrogant, superficial, validation-seeking, insecure, angry, treated people around him horribly. At one point, the person he was dating, and because he was so insecure, he would waste lots of money on gifts, not just for her, but for everyone around him. He was notoriously big tipper, that kind of thing. Well, at one point, she was witnessing yet another of his rage festivals and yelling. He was yelling at various household employees and family members, but this time his girlfriend, who wasn't very nice herself, she had had it with him. And it turns out that he had also just purchased a very expensive gift for her. He gave her the day before. But because she was so exasperated with him, she left because she thought he was acting like such an awful person. After she left, he became an insta-victim. He couldn't believe that nobody could appreciate him. He took such good care of everyone. He buys everyone so much gifts. He spent so much on her. So now his narrative was that she was just using him. And then he slumped into a deflated balloon. He cried. He told her he missed her and that people have always left him and he would buy her anything she wanted. And, nobody likes him. And he knows the only reason anyone likes him is because he spends money. Who knows if she came back to him because of the gift or because of him? She claimed she came back to him because she felt so bad for him because he was so pathetic. And she felt guilty, like she was to blame. And as far as I know, I don't have contact with these people anymore. The cycle still continues between these two. They are caught in their trauma bonded dance. He vacillates between bullying and then when people call him out, becoming the victim. And anytime she finds her strength to leave, his victimhood, and I'm guessing the rather expensive gifts that he purchases, pull her back in. This was a toxic dance wrapped in a transactional mess. Narcissistic relationship. The victim bully is every narcissist ever. We see it all the time. For example, when idiot celebrities tweet or post stupid, thoughtless opinions on social media without thinking about who they would hurt or how insensitive the comment would be. And folks, this is on all sides of the political spectrum, right, left, and everybody in between. I think maybe normal people do this too, but when normal people do it, nobody cares. But then the celebrity gets called out. And then it's a whole victimized, oh, okay, I know, I wasn't thinking, I was misunderstood. It's so hard to be a celebrity. I'm shutting down my social media because I'm so misunderstood, blah, blah, blah. It's the same thing. Celebrities and politicians with their enormous platforms and egos can be bullies, and then they immediately behave like victims when they get called out for behaving so badly. The main reason narcissistic people get away with stuff, it's actually quite interesting. We understand, frankly, that 3-year-old children need consequences for their behavior. If they mouth off, they get a consequence. If they don't tidy up their toys, maybe they get a consequence. If they throw their food, a consequence. Hit their sibling, consequence. Don't clean up their cubby at school, consequence. But adult narcissists, no consequences. The victim play, that's their response to a consequence. We hold them accountable. Narcissists, every so often, we hold them accountable, and then they immediately become a victim. And all of us fall for it. Oh, poor, sad narcissist. But really, bullies don't like consequences. If consequences are good enough for a 3-year-old, then they are good enough for a 43-year-old. So when you feel pulled to rescue the victimized bully, stop yourself and recognize that they're just a 3-year-old that's pissed off about time off. It makes it a lot easier to try to not get in there and appease them. And remember, the narcissist isn't two people. They are just one well-oiled manipulation machine. But let's get to this one. A bad worker always blames their tools. You may or may not have heard this proverb, but this one actually has some pretty old origins, as all of these do. This one is traced to the 13th century French. I could not find a particular author associated with this. And then back then, the way that phrase translated from the French was that basically a bad tradesperson can never find the right tool. Now, I think you understand what the saying means, right? It makes sense at the face of it. If a person is unskilled, and on top of that is also uninsightful or lacks self-reflective capacity, they blame the lack of a tool rather than their own inability or their own irresponsibility. It's a bit like victimhood mixed with blame.
So when we take this proverb, a bad worker blames their tools, we take this one and we elevate it beyond the tools. Really what it's saying, it's a glimpse at the blame deflection that is a central core of narcissism. Narcissists have a very hard time taking responsibility or blame, so they push it out. So just like that bad worker who blames the shoddy work on a lack of tools or blames their inability to fix something on not having the right tool, the narcissistic personality will blame everyone in their lives for the mistakes that they make. People with this personality style blame others for their failures, for their disappointments, for their stress, for their frustrations. This makes these relationships incredibly challenging because you're constantly being blamed for their issues. In fact, in the early conversations with a narcissistic individual, when you first meet them, you will actually find yourself trying to engage with their blaming. You'll say things like, I didn't do that. That's not my fault. No, really, I'm not the one who did that. And on and on and on. You know where that goes. Now, really, at these times, reality doesn't matter to them at those times with those personality styles. Reality doesn't matter to people who are narcissistic. It's all about them being able to cast blame out so they can maintain their grandiose and perfectionistic version of themselves. I don't make mistakes. It's everybody else's fault. The bad sales presentation wasn't their fault. It was the client's fault for rescheduling. It was the assistant's fault for not getting the materials organized on time. It was their partner's fault for not keeping the house quieter while they were preparing for the sales presentation. It's everybody else's fault. And that blame deflection is a classical element of these relationships, the proverbial bad tools. The blame projection and deflection of the narcissistic relationship, honestly, for a lot of people who go through these relationships, is one of the most exhausting, destabilizing, confusing, and manipulating parts of these relationships. Sort of them not being able to find their tools and blaming everyone else often means that other people end up taking too much responsibility, even for things that they are not responsible for. So the person who's not the narcissist takes on all the responsibility. It's not their responsibility. And because of taking all this responsibility for things you didn't even do, that can really result to holding on to negative emotions like guilt and self-blame. And over time, if you spend enough time with a person who's narcissistic, they don't even have to blame you after a while. You get so indoctrinated into their way of thinking that you self-blame before they can blame you. It's almost like after a while, you just sort of cut out the manipulative middleman and you do it to yourself. Sometimes people who find themselves in narcissistic relationships, now whether this is a family of origin relationship, whether this is an intimate relationship or a workplace relationship, they will try and overcompensate by making sure that everything is hyper controlled. So you're in a relationship with a narcissistic individual, you might try to compensate by making sure everything's very controlled, very organized. This can be exhausting. People in these relationships will find themselves almost at an obsessive and almost compulsive level of trying to control the environment, of trying to control their own words or their own behaviors enough. So the possibility of activating the blame-shifting tirade in the narcissist is minimized. And then you just keep appeasing and enabling the narcissist. You've got the house so organized that if they're like, it's your fault I couldn't find the scissors are exactly where they need to be. It's really difficult because to steer clear of being blamed by someone else who is clearly not taking responsibility means that you have to work on your own sense of self-assurance, to be clear and aware on what you are responsible for, to be clear and aware of what you're not responsible for, and understand that some of it is gray and that there is shared responsibility. The narcissistic individual is engaged in a very unconscious and a very primitive process of projection and offloading of shameful or uncomfortable deficits that they don't want to have to keep stirring in themselves. And so they project them onto other people. And the narcissistic disconnection from empathy actually means it's easier to blame others because you don't stop to think, they don't stop to think, how would someone feel if I blame them for this when they're not really responsible? The challenge is that the blame shifting is also often coupled with victimization and a sense of persecution. A person who is narcissistic will say, I can't find the right tool. And that's because nobody supports me having the right tools, or they hide my tools. Things like, I screwed up the sales presentation because people are out to get me and nobody believes in me or wants to support me. That self-victimization is such a classical piece of the narcissistic personality style. So whomever was this frustrated French writer who watched people do a lousy job and blame other people actually did a really nice job of capturing this dynamic of the bad worker blaming their tools and clearly telling us that this is a part of what human behavior and difficult human behavior and what some people do and have always done for hundreds of years, not taking responsibility and then blaming something or someone else for their failings. But it's always best in these blame shifty times not to engage or to engage minimally. If they blame you for something that is clearly really something you didn't do, you just nod politely and just say a gentle, okay. Document when needed, and then recognize that they're never going to listen to your version of the events. Some people say, it's unjust, it's unjust. Why shouldn't they hear that I'm not the one responsible? It is unjust, and they aren't listening. So DARVO is an acronym that captures the reaction of perpetrators. Frankly, I believe it captures the reaction of any narcissistic person when you attempt to hold them accountable for their behavior. Now, this acronym, DARVO, it stands for denial, attack, reversing victim and offender. Okay? Denial, attack, reversing victim and offender. DARVO. Got it? It's a good thing to know. Now, this acronym was developed through the work of someone named Dr. Jennifer Freed, who is a psychologist and scholar who does really, I find it incredibly compelling research on perpetration and betrayal. We'll put her website in the video notes for those of you who might want to do a deeper dive into her science and scholarship, because it's really quite great. But I want you to sit with that whole DARVO acronym for a minute, because that's it, right? You try to hold a narcissistic person accountable, and this is what happens every single time. It's a really clear laying out of the gaslighting dynamic. So really what DARVO does is it really captures gaslighting in a really solid way. So let's lay this out as an example, right? You go up to a narcissistic person in your life and you let them know that they've done something wrong, and you directly address that with them. So the first step, you know this, they're going to deny it. I never did that. I never said that. That never happened. This is every antagonistic person ever, right? They always deny. It's always a convenient first play for them. It buys some time. They may think you don't have evidence. Hell, they'll even deny if you have evidence. And if you do have evidence, or they really did do it, picture, video, something else, but they know they did it, they won't comment on the evidence. They're going to go right to attack. Now, the attack can involve the dismantling of the other person. Well, of course, I guess this is what I get from a paranoid person like you. Like, when are you going into therapy? Or maybe you need a new shrink since you are as crazy as ever. And then The attack could also happen in other ways. It may not just be a dismantling of you, but they may do things like threaten to sue you or give you these sorts of threats like, you better watch out. I know people. You better watch your back. Or I could ruin your reputation. Or you think you've got this on me? Wait till you see what I've got on you. The attack phase is exhausting, can even be frightening. And frankly, unless you're a fighter yourself, even if you initially put up the fight, they never get exhausted. So over time, the fight may go out of view. And most of us are conflict averse. So after one or two of these attack episodes, most people will not only relent, they'll often just not bring things up. But the attack part of this is really unsettling and really scary. This is, for example, where you may have concerns that things you may have shared with them in confidence, they could tell those to other people, and it could hurt other people if they shared it. If it's work or business, you may be concerned that even if their lawsuit is unfounded, that the cost of having to hire someone to defend against it and spend the time on it and the disruption of it can be, again, time-consuming but also unsettling. You may also get somewhat concerned for your safety. But this whole Darvo thing, they're clever. At the face of it, they say something that is not directly threatening. They don't say, I'm going to come get you. But they learn to create a sense of menace, and you don't feel safe. And let's face it, in the internet world we live in, nobody cares about what's true. They just read a defamatory post. And even if you do come behind it and address it and make it known it's untrue, the harm may be done. Now, interestingly, after the attack, these folks, narcissistic folks, they release tension. They almost feel better, and after feeling they got the upper hand and they sort of dominated you, they will then actually come down a bit, and that's when they'll engage in the final part of this process. They reverse the victim and offender roles. Now, all phases of this whole Darvo process are awful, but this is particularly awful. They will then shift to painting themselves as the victim and you as the attacker or the problem. And this is where they'll start to talk about things like witch hunts and everyone is out to get them and you or nobody else ever wanted them to succeed and everyone wants them to fail and people are always trying to bring them down and people always try to bring down people who are telling the truth and you had more power than me and you used that power to hurt me, to hurt my business. Yep, they turn themselves into the victim. So now, you're the person who was harmed, and you got harmed just because you were trying to get this person to be accountable. You're now harmed. You're on the defensive because you are painted as the offender. So you went from being harmed to having to defend yourself from being the perpetrator yourself. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples because I think that makes it so much clearer. You have a narcissistic colleague or coworker. You find evidence that your coworker, who is narcissistic, has been doing some shady stuff. You finally find the email showing them that they are taking credit for your work and other team members' work, and that's affecting things like commissions or bonuses or advancement, something like that. You then confront them. Initially, you say, hey, we can see that you're actually taking credit for our work, and you're actually getting the monthly bonuses for that. And they'll say, no, I'm not. What the hell? I'd never do that. I'm the most fair person in this place. I'm like so ethical. Then you show them the emails. You want to continue the conversation. Now we go into attack mode. Now you face down like, are you kidding me? You better watch out. I could bring you down in this industry just like that. I can make you look insane. I will ensure that everyone in this whole industry never does business with you again. And I'm also going to HR. I have those texts you sent me about the administrative team. I always had your back. I never shared this stuff, but I guess you want to play this game? You better watch out. So now you're thinking, was it even worth it? Now you've got a whole new world of problems, right? Now you have to deal with all the stuff that they're threatening to do when all you were trying to do is achieve some level of equitability. Then, now, reverse victim offender, they paint themselves as the victim and you as the offender. Everyone, I am filming that I'm being harassed. Everyone, I want everyone to see I'm being harassed. This is a hostile workplace. They will say, I knew people were insecure about me being on this team. I knew that. I told the truth and all of you were uncomfortable. I knew that. None of you could hang with that. I can't believe that people are coming for me like this. It has always felt like everyone around me has always had it out for me. Now I know it's true. Lather, rinse, repeat. That's the Darvo in the workplace. Now, this comes up. Let's give another Darvo example. It could come up when you confront a cheating narcissistic partner. It comes up every time somebody confronts someone in that situation. You might come up to a partner and say, hey, yeah, listen, I just was told by the folks you work with that you're spending a lot of time with that new manager on your team, and you didn't tell me that they were coming with you on that trip to New York. And then, listen, people saw you two holding hands when you were at an after party. Like, what the hell is going on? So something like that. You talk to your partner. Obviously, they're going to deny, no, I didn't. Obviously not. I don't share where I eat. That's not me. You're just threatened because they're attractive. We've been here before. I don't even notice. I don't do that. Deny, deny, deny. Then you show them a picture that someone shared with you from that night. A little grainy, but clearly they were holding hands. Then we get the attack and the victim offender reversal, right? Oh my gosh, this relationship with you is a nightmare. Honestly, if I did do something, I would have had the right to do it. You never support me. You never encourage me. And you waste all our damn time and money on therapy and your stupid medications. That therapy seems to just be making you more paranoid. And let me tell you, don't push me. You don't want to see what I would do to you in a divorce. You would be sorry. You keep bringing this nonsense up. You have it real good here. Don't mess it up for yourself. Don't mess it up for the kids. Your family has always said that you're too needy. Wait till I share this story with them. Okay, so you see a lot of that attacking and even that they're the victim. Things like, you need me to be the bad one so you can be the hero of the household, right? It's always me working late. It's always me having to travel endlessly, dealing with the stress of this job. I do all of this so you can just keep sniping at me for more time together when I already spend way more than anyone else I know is spending with their partner. I can't believe you're coming at me like this again. Who the hell do you think makes this damned life possible for all of you? Okay, reversal, a victim, and offender. Darvo is pernicious. The last part, the reversing of roles and making themselves the victim when they have so clearly done wrong, is the gaslighting main event. Because initially, if you don't know it is happening and you start getting caught in defending all the nonsense they're throwing at you, we've always supported you, I don't spend that much money, I am grateful for our life together, you can see how it falls apart. You're now in a role of having to defend yourself. You didn't do anything wrong. You just wanted accountability. Now, this Darvo model was developed by Dr. Freed to understand all kinds of perpetrators, and it fits in interpersonal relationships and even folks who are famous and in the media, world leaders. Anyone who does bad things, denies them, attacks the people who calls them out, and then flips the script so they are the victim. Look at any one of these kinds of big legal cases that are adjudicated and how ended up sentenced. Things like Keith Raniere, Elizabeth Holmes, Harvey Weinstein. Deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. It's what antagonistic folks do. Sort of, you could do this as a fun game night thing. Think of any of these big ticket trials and go back over the coverage. You will see it holds true, the Darvo of it all, every single time. Now, the beauty of this acronym is that it provides a way of understanding it while it is happening to you, almost in real time. When you see it happening, you may be shocked initially, But when there's a long-standing acronym in place, then it's a thing. And if it's a thing, then that's a reminder that you aren't the only one dealing with it. Now, holding a narcissistic or antagonistic person accountable is pointless and futile. You would have more luck teaching your cat to do the dishes. And the confusion that ensues when you try to get them to be accountable can leave people feeling as though they may be the ones that are wrong. You should really check out Dr. Freed's work. She's really, really a rock star, and her work theoretically lays out all of the traumas, not only around betrayal, but this idea of how almost every single time in these kinds of relationships, this deny, attack, reverse victim offender, this Darvo model applies in these kinds of cases and kind of gives you a framework so you realize it's not you who's losing your mind. That's just how this thing works. Thanks again.